What's up guys, Lady Locks here and welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel. Today I want to talk to you about something that I never really talk about too much on my channel, and that is tensioning. I think it was LPL who said skillful tensioning is probably more important than skillful picking, and I really agree with that. There are so many different things that we do when we're tensioning a lock, and we never ever even mention it in our videos. So we go right to telling you about the pins that we're picking. And yes, that is important, but I think it's also a little bit misleading because we don't tell you all the different nuances that we're doing with the tensioner. So when I'm tensioning my lock, if I was going to explain to you what it is I was doing, it would take me twice as long as when I'm explaining what's going on with the pins. That's how many things I'm doing to that tensioner while I'm picking the lock. But again, we don't talk about it. And I think that really leads people to think that tensioning is not very important. You just throw on some medium tension and you pick the pins and the lock should open. And that is really not what even happens. So today I want to try to clear some of that up. I want to talk about all the different types of tensioners, what they're called, what you use them for, and then we'll talk about some of those little nuances that we kind of skip over in a lot of our videos. And hopefully by the end of this video, you'll be able to take this information and use it to figure out how to tension your locks. So please don't forget to leave a thumbs up if you like this video, and let's get into it. I would wager to guess that some of the locks in your naughty bucket are just locks that you weren't tensioning correctly, and that's probably why they weren't opening. There's a lot to it, and tensioning is so important. And so I want to get that across to you today, just how important tensioning is. Not only does each lock tension differently, but if you think about it, every single pin inside those locks could potentially need some different types of tension while you're picking it. So it's a lot. All right, so what you're looking at here is just a giant pile of tensioning tools. It's really important that you have a whole bunch of these. They need to be different sizes, different shapes, different thicknesses, and you just need to have one for every keyway that you're going to encounter, which is pretty hard to do because there's tons of keyways. Let's take it one type at a time. First up, we've got what I call a flat bar because it's flat. It's great inside of keyways such as the American keyway. This little portion right here is exactly the size you need to place in the top of an American lock, and it's the perfect height to make its way over top of the kind of face of the lock here. So you still have got enough inside of the lock to tension it, but it's enough that, you know, you're over top of the face of the lock as well. Now, personally, I have no clue what this side is used for. I've never had to use it in anything. And quite frankly, it's a pain in the butt when you do accidentally use it. It is so tall that when you try to use it in the top of the keyway, it kind of wobbles this way and it can pop out, causing lots of frustration. So I just ignore that side for the most part. I'm sure someday it'll come in handy and I'll be glad to have it, but for now I just use this short side. Next up, we've got a Z-bar. The short part of the Z-bar is perfect for in the top of the keyway like this, and it is about the perfect height, again, to kind of clear that lock body. So it's perfect in there. The longer end of these Z-bars are great for bottom of the keyway tensioning in any type of lock that they would fit in. So there you have it in the bottom of the keyway. Next up, we've got the full-size ergo turners. They are ergonomically designed to be comfortable in your hand. This short end fits into the top of the keyway on these American 1100 locks, or these types of clones that have that, you know, face that is raised from the lock. And you can actually hold it with your finger bent like this, and that is why it is called the ergo tensioner. It works really great. Again, I have no use for this side of this tensioner. This is a flat Z-bar type tensioner, and these are primarily used for dimple locks. Now, when you use them on a dimple lock, you want to place them in the side that doesn't have the pins coming down. And you definitely want to use one that's as thick as possible, that fits your lock as thick as possible, but that is what these are used for. And you can use the longer end or the shorter end, whichever is, you know, the size that you need. Obviously, this one is not fat enough to fit in here, and that's where the thicknesses come in. You definitely need all of these things in multiple thicknesses. So you've got to have a couple of different thicknesses of each type of tensioner. And that way, when you run into a keyway that is smaller or larger, you will have the correct tensioner. When you are tensioning something, you definitely want to make sure that you are filling up the keyway as much as possible. You do not want your tensioner to be loose. So for instance, on this American 1100 lock, we've got a tensioner in 40 thousandths, and that is the one that I would choose for this lock. It fits perfectly. It doesn't wiggle that much, and it's really kind of tight in there, and that is what I would use. If you try to use one that's too thin, you're going to get a lot of wiggle, and that is definitely not what you want. It's hard enough to tension in the top of the keyway when you're first learning. If you're not using a good enough tensioner, a fat enough tensioner for the keyway, it's just going to pop out and get on your nerves. Some tensioners come with the thicknesses written on the side of the tensioner, like the Covert Instruments ones have. And some of them actually have colored bands that are wrapped around them to represent certain thicknesses. What you see before you here is a 3D printed kind of cross section of what is inside of a pin tumbler lock. Now what you're doing when you're picking a lock is you are applying tension to the lock so that you can basically create a shelf for all of those pins to sit on when you pick them. So when you pop them up over the shear line, they need a place to sit, and they need a place to stay up above the shear line. So you're just making a little shelf. Just remember that you don't want to take the shelf away or your pins will all drop, right? So at all times you have to have a little bit of that shelf there for those pins to sit on. You just want to take your lock and turn your core until it stops. And you just want to kind of hold it in place. You want to have it so that when you are applying pressure to your pins, you can feel counter rotation, and you can actually set pins. If it's too tight, you won't be able to set pins. If it's too loose, you won't find anything binding. So you have to basically adjust your tension throughout your picking process, little by little. You may need to apply some heavier tension to feel which pins are binding, and then you might have to apply heavier tension to feel which pins are counter rotating. You know, this is a great way to feel counter rotation, is to kind of give a little bit heavier tension. But if you use too much tension, you cannot feel counter rotation because you're just holding it in place and it won't counter rotate. If you're trying to set a spool pin, you might have to let off tension a bit to actually set the pin. If you overset pins, that just basically means that you've got your key pin trapped at the shear line there, and you need to kind of gently let off tension in order to let that pin fall back down. And hopefully all of your pins will stay set and only the overset pin will drop. I would suggest just going pin by pin. You've got to be able to loosen the tension and give heavier tension as needed as you're going through each of the pins throughout the lock, without dropping down all the pins that you've already got set. It's all basically just balancing that tension perfectly so that you can keep that shelf there for all your pins to sit up on, and you can still feel all of the feedback. The feedback that you feel when you're picking, a lot of that comes from your tensioner, guys. So you gotta pay close attention to every little move you're making with your tensioner. You constantly want to have your tension hand relaxed. You want to be able to control your tension in a whole separate thought process than what you're doing with your picking hand. Just keep going back and reminding yourself to relax your tensioning hand. Just keep it relaxed and loose. Now, I hope this helps you guys. I hope the visual aid helps a little bit. If you have any questions or comments or suggestions, please leave it in the comment section below. I look forward to hearing what you guys think about this video, and I will see you on the next one.